My name is Micah, and I'm the lead pastor here at the church, if you didn't figure that out already. As we move into our time in God's Word, I'll just share full disclosure that I was never supposed to be a pastor. I went to school I studied music. I went to school to be a teacher. I wanted to teach music. That was what I had sort of decided, and God, I think, had led me to do that, and so I started to do that. But along the way, I had some opportunities in the church that I didn't really look for. The first was many years ago, I was in Bozeman going to college, and the pastor asked if I would preach for him. He said, "I'm going out of town. Do you want to preach for me?" And I was really hesitant because I thought, I don't know that you know what you're asking, but sure. And so I preached, and there might be a couple of you, I don't know if any more, that were at that church the time that I preached, but apparently it was a little bit TMI. I shared too much information, if you don't know what that means. The pastor got back and heard some things, and he met with me and said, "Hey, good job." And he also gave me some feedback. Years later, I had another opportunity to preach where I decided to go through a whole book of the Old Testament in one message. I had 7 points, and that time the superintendent called, and he said, "Good job. Also, people can't follow you." Hopefully, I hope that's changed somewhat. My point in sharing that is not at all to say, wow, now look, I'm way better than I used to be, but to suggest that I wouldn't be here at all if I had not been given opportunity. If someone had not taken a risk on this college student and seen some potential that I certainly did not see in myself. Here I am now, though, on approaching the other end of this spectrum 25 years later, and I'm feeling like, am I going to be able to connect with younger people for much longer? Whether you would say yes or no to that, it's an insecurity. Is there a point at which I won't be effective? That I'll need to step away? I mean, the last part of that, 100%. I believe fully and celebrate the seasons that God leads people into roles, the transitions of leadership, raising people up. But at the same time, I've recognized that we can tend to have these invisible metrics where we sort of disqualify ourselves in ways that God doesn't. Maybe it is based on age, and you think, I'm too young, and at some point I'll be able to be used by God. Or I'm too old, and you're living in your past memories of the good old days. Maybe for you it's official qualifications. I don't have a degree or any training, or I don't seem to have influence with people the way others do. And we, again, find ways to disqualify ourselves in ways that God does not. Today we're going to talk about how God has created all of us intentionally unique, and He has entrusted all of us with certain desires and gifts and opportunities and purpose for our lives related to His kingdom. Do you believe that? That is one of the most foundational aspects of my heart for this church and my heart for the church in general. We are in a series called God's Got This. We're looking at the character of David in the Bible, and it's leading up to Summer Adventure Week. This is the theme of SAW this year is David, this man who demonstrated, on the one hand, remarkable trust in God through all kinds of ups and downs, but also had unusual confidence in the person God made him to be and the way God prepared him for what God had for him. Not egotistical pride, but a character-tested confidence. This is who I am, and this is how God wants me to operate. Last week, we talked about humility. We looked at Psalm 51. David failed in some really dramatic ways, but showed how to return to God, how to humble ourselves, how to confess, how to take responsibility for our choices, and be cleansed. Receive a new heart, have our spirit renewed, have joy restored. That if last week the desire was for us to learn to humble ourselves, today I want to talk about the beautiful paradox of the Bible that when we are humble, He exalts us. That when we are weak, according to 2 Corinthians chapter 12, we are strong in Him. And so, not in contrast to last week, but as a sequence, as a progression from last week, we are going to talk about how God has made each one of us and that we can experience confidence in that. We can be empowered in the person God made us to be and live into that. Whether you think of yourself as too young or too old, whether you used to hold a role in the church and you no longer do, and you think, well, I'll just move aside so others can do ministry. Maybe things were going well and then you messed up and you feel like you can never go back or get back what you had. Whatever the reason, I want you to leave today knowing if you are alive, you have purpose. And God is calling you into that purpose. 1 Samuel 17 is the chapter of the Bible we're going to look at today. If you want to turn in Bibles to 1 Samuel 17. And last week I shared the page number for the psalm we were looking at, only to learn this week that there are two different versions of the Bible out there and page numbers. So if you were one of those people that turned to the page I said to and it was nothing of what I said, it was not a practical joke. I didn't know that there were two editions of the Bible out there. But anyway, find your way to 1 Samuel 17. And as you do that, David in this chapter is watching the sheep. He's the shepherd. He's watching the family sheep. And his father sends for him and says, I want you to go take food to your brothers. 3 of his brothers were serving with King Saul in the army and fighting the Philistine army. And he says, I want you to go to your brothers, take them food and some stuff and check on them and see how they're doing. Now, I said that they were fighting the Philistine army. They were rather feigning. They were paralyzed in fear because of this giant. 9 foot, 9.5 feet or so tall, by the name of Goliath. He's mocking the army. He's mocking God. He's saying, is there anybody with the courage to come fight me? Nobody's going out to face him. And David shows up with food and is like, why is nobody fighting him? Why are we letting him talk like that about our God? And some of the soldiers reported this to the king, and King Saul called for David. And we're going to read today and see what happens next. 1 Samuel 17, verse 32. David comes before the king and said to Saul, let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. Saul replied, you are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth. But David said to Saul, your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine. Saul said to David, go and the Lord be with you. We're going to continue next week with what happens. But, there's probably a profile that we could come up with for the soldier who would be fit to go confront Goliath. And there is nothing about David that fits that profile. Nobody would have said at that moment, he should go out. This is a great idea. And so the question is, how did it happen? Because he does end up going and facing Goliath. Number one, there's 2 observations. David trusted God. Everybody else was running the numbers. They were looking at their armor. Think that's thick enough for Goliath's spear? They were probably comparing muscles. Especially guys do this. Like they get together and they're like, check this out. And then they push their arm up here and it's a little, and they're, oh man, I don't know, but I'm pretty tough. And maybe they were looking at the number of soldiers in the army and none of it really penciled out. So they were paralyzed. They were stuck. And this is sometimes how life is, right? Though you you step out, because David says, I'll go. Even though it made no sense, you step out, let's say you choose to be generous, not knowing if you'll have enough, and then God brings you through the month. You forgive someone scared that they're going to get away with what they did, but really you just set yourself free. You step out in faith and you talk to someone when you have no idea what you're going to say, and you see God do something you never expected him to do. This is a theme in the Bible, if you haven't noticed. As a side note, kind of a random one, when the previous pastor stepped away here at Mac, another pastor said to me, the only one who can fill his shoes has to have a master's degree in theology and 25 years of pastoring experience. And I said, yeah, that'd be great. And at the same time, I just apologize that you guys ended up with me instead. God surprises us. He asks us to do things that we're not ready for. He asks us to trust him. See, David didn't run the numbers. He believed in God. He trusted God. He knew this was God's work. He just had to step into it. So he trusted God. But David also, and this is a beautiful pairing to just this sort of like, trust God, I'm going to go, whoa, here we go. Jump off the cliff, God will catch you. David also knew himself. See, this wasn't blind hope. David wasn't winging it. He had been prepared unknowingly in some pretty unconventional ways for the challenge at hand. And I wonder if this wasn't the first time David realized that encounter with the lion. That pushing away the bear, God, I wonder if God was preparing me for this. Friends, some of you are in the proverbial sheep pen. This was not a desirable job. His brothers are off defending the kingdom, and he's watching the sheep. And then on top of it, a bear comes and attacks, and you're going after the bear. Come on, let go of the sheep, bring it back, and then it turns on you. And then a lion comes, and you're like, I didn't ask for this. I don't know if you've ever been or are currently in a role, a job, a life circumstance that you're not stoked about. And then the wheels come off the bus. Your boss yells at you. Somebody is mad. A coworker slacks on their job, and you have to do more work, and you don't get recognized for that. Friends, these trying moments from David's past were preparation for the epic moment of the present. And to say this more practically, today's pressure is preparation for tomorrow's purpose. Today's pressure, today's inconvenience is not lost. It is not wasted. It is not accidental. It is God preparing you. I don't know what for. But I think of those verses in, I think it's 2 Corinthians 1, where it says that we go through trials and God comforts us so that we can comfort others when they go through trial. There's a picture of purpose. And what often feels like delay to us, anybody feel, you don't have to raise your hand, like you just wish things could move along a little more quickly. What often feels like delay is development. God is working something in you. He's preparing you. There is no job, no disappointment, no loss that is wasted. So for David, the pasture was preparation for the battlefield. And more personally, the private moments, I think this is so important, especially as Americans, where we value privacy more highly than any generation or culture in history. What you do in the private moments when no one is watching is preparing you for the public moment when everyone's watching. This is David out in the field. Nobody said, hey, thanks for delivering that sheep. He was just being faithful. And I want to recognize none of us is probably going to grab a lion by the mane and kill it. I don't even know how that would work. But I think there is a biblical principle that I would want to share from Jesus himself. Jesus said this, "Whoever is faithful with little will also be faithful with much." God often starts us out with a little. That bear comes and he's like, I wonder what David's going to do. Is he going to complain? Say, I don't deserve this, and go running home? Is he going to run away in the other direction and just let him have the sheep? Or is he going to stand? Is he going to lay down his life even if nobody thanks him for it? Can you bring your whole self into that boring job, knowing God has you there on purpose? Can you honor your father and mother even when you think they don't know what they're talking about? Can you give thanks even when you've had a frustrating day? These are all preparatory moments for more. I don't know what, more responsibility, more impact. This does not necessarily mean a title in the church, which is how we tend to think of tiers of ministry, which is just not a biblical model, or importance. These are human metrics. It means more of God and more being used by God, whatever shape that may take in your life. See, God sent that bear to David to see what he would do. And David trusted God, he was faithful, and in the process, he learned who he was. And this healthy self-knowledge continues in the story. We'll just pick back up in 1 Samuel 17, verse 38. Saul gives his blessing for David to go fight. God be with you. I can't help but wonder if there wasn't just a little smile on his face like, good luck, kiddo. Sure, a lot of condescending tone probably in the camp at that point. But David, it says in verse 38, then Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put on a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. Now I want to just think of the honor that you come and offer to go, and the king himself gives you his own armor. Like the king goes and says, here's my everything. Here's my tunic. Here's my all of it. My sword. There would be no thought of you turning the king down. You would put that stuff on. You would say, well, if it's good enough for the king, it's good enough for me. Especially when you look around and everybody else has the same armor. If David had a social media feed, this is what he's seeing on every post. I guess I need armor. I guess that's what it means to be a good fighter, to be successful. I guess I'll go get some. But David looked at Saul and said, continuing in verse 39, I cannot go in these because I'm not used to them. So he took them off. Then he took his staff in his hand, chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with his sling in his hand, approached the Philistine. David knew who he was. God had prepared him, and it gave him the courage to be himself, to not try to be someone that he wasn't, to not try to copy what someone else was doing as some sort of formula for success, formula for recognition and respect. No. And I just want to appreciate how these soldiers likely reacted, watching David take off the king's armor and, I don't know, lay it down, and then he goes and starts picking up rocks. There had to be some mocking. There had to be some laughing, some joking, some, let's see how this goes. But David in this moment was not trying to be liked. He wasn't trying to be popular. I don't even think David was trying to be heroic. I just think he was trying to be faithful. Like when he was out with the sheep when no one was watching, he wanted to do the right thing. He wanted to honor God, and he thought, well, if no one else will do it, I guess I will, but I'm going to go in the way God has prepared me to go. I just want to tell you, especially young people, you will be faced with more situations than you can count where your friends are doing one thing, And you, if you're paying attention, will feel God calling you to do something different. And grown-ups, it doesn't change for us. The harsh reality is that initial decision to listen to God, to follow God, won't make sense to the world. It'll seem irrational, even insane. And I thought of some examples just from my own experience and conversations I've had with people. Giving part of your income to support the work of God in the church. I've had conversations with people. It just makes no sense. God's design for sexuality and relationships. I know this is a hot topic. It always is. If you embrace God's way, which will lead to the greatest flourishing, if you don't do what everyone else is doing, live together, sleep together, if you avoid situations, music and movies that stir up desires in your heart that you know are not healthy, you will be a fool in the eyes of our culture. It won't make any sense to them. They will laugh at you. And that's David here. He knew who he was in God. He knew who God made him to be and what God had called him to do, and he just stepped forward in that. And next week, as I said, we're going to see where the story goes. Some of you already know. If you don't, you can just keep reading in the Bible. We're going to look at David's bold faith, how despite our differences, God calls all of us into this boldness of faith with him. But I just want to circle back in the last part before we close to this tendency to disqualify ourselves. Either we're too young, and maybe we've been told, maybe we've been looked down upon. Maybe it's, hey, kiddo, sit the bench. And you'll have your turn eventually. And maybe it's too old. I've had my time. I'm tired. Nobody really asks me anymore for advice. I don't have enough training. I wanted to go to college, but I never did. Maybe it's your past, and that follows you around, and you've allowed it to define you and limit you. Maybe you feel like you missed your moment, or you never had one to start with. Or how easily, friends, can we focus on what we don't have, which completely blinds us to what we do have? We hold up our weaknesses against someone else's strengths, and we go, well, there it is. I'm not qualified. But none of that is from God. All God is asking us to do is walk with him, trust him, show up, be bold, be willing. That's where you begin to discover who you are in him, and you get to see him do amazing things. One of the best verses related to young people, Paul writes to Timothy, who was asked to lead in the church in Ephesus. Apparently he was a younger man. I'm sure there were many in this sophisticated, well-educated city who knew more than Timothy. They were better educated. They had more life experience. They had better ideas on the music they should be doing, or the color of the carpet, or whatever the thing was. And Paul is prompted to say this to Timothy: don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. Notice the answer wasn't to tell those people to sit down and shut up, to lord his authority. You have a role, you have a title, Timothy, you're important. That wasn't it. He said, set an example. And by the way, this word for look down upon is a euphemistic wording of what is actually being expressed in the Greek language. It is to view with contempt and to despise. I don't know who was in the church looking at this young guy up there, probably stuttering a little bit and trying to figure out what to say next, and they're like, this kid. Paul says, don't let them. Don't let them. But how do I not let them? He doesn't say, argue with them. Prove to them how important you are. Nope. Just prove them wrong. Set an example of godliness. Set an example of faith. Set an example of love in such a way that whatever they think of you, they will not be able to deny the hand of God upon you. Set an example now. You have everything you need to be all God made you to be today. Calling doesn't come with a college degree. It comes from God. So young people, ask yourself, what has God called me to be? What do I want my life to look like in 10 years? What desires, what passions, even what hurts have I experienced that overlap with what I think God is doing in the world around me? And then whatever the answer is, go after it. Don't wait. Set an appointment with a pastor and say, I want to be all in. Ask for opportunity. I was offered opportunity at an age when I don't know that I should have been. Ask, not in some self-promoting way, obviously, but come to the leaders. Be open to serving. Set an example. That is where you're going to start discovering how God has wired you and who he's made you to be. And I'll just add that at one point they put me in children's ministry. I was the director. And they asked me to choose curriculum and schedule teachers. I don't know that God's wired me for that. But I did it for 6 months. And I would suggest the same for older people. Set an example. Please don't disengage. Please don't disappear into the luxuries of retired life. Please don't settle for walking your dog and watching the sunset. Those are beautiful gifts, but God has more for you. Don't disqualify yourself because you don't have the same energy or companionship. There's more opportunity now for you than ever before. I recently heard of a conversation with someone at Mac. The retired, solid person, nothing but time on their hands, and someone said, hey, you should come alongside a younger person and do the mentoring thing. And they just quickly said, no, I'm not qualified. And I just have thought about that, not in a judgmental way, because I've felt the same. What would it take to feel qualified? After a life of walking with God, to come alongside someone younger who's desperate for wisdom and investment and faith. What does qualified mean? You know what I think? I think it's Saul's armor. It's that picture that we all have in our mind of the Bible degree, of the title, of the official role, and most of us try on that armor or we imagine and we go, it's just not me. And rather than rightly realizing, no, it's maybe not. That's okay though. We go home. We disengage. But I was thinking about this, how many people in Missoula would have no interest in meeting with me because of the role I'm in. I used to not be a pastor, and I could just say, I'm Micah. And by the way, that's what I say. I don't say like, hi, I'm pastor. But people ask what I do. And I used to be able to say, I drive an airport shuttle. And they're like, cool, well, and I say pastor and things change. You guys are on the front lines of ministry in places I will never be invited to go. With people I will never be able to talk to, and they'll listen. You are where you're meant to be. God has placed you there. For those of you who've lived some life, I shared a verse for younger people. I'm going to share one for you. How's that? David wrote this in Psalm 71, "O God, from my youth you have taught me, and I still proclaim your wondrous deeds. So even to my old age and gray hairs, O God, do not forsake me until I proclaim your might to another generation, your power to all those to come." That's why you're here. That's what God has for you, to set an example, to engage, to pursue the next generation, to pass along what God has given you. And what God has given you is different than what God has given the person next to you. Yeah, there's going to be common themes of overlap in the truth of God's word and certain things that are common to us all. There's going to be a whole lot of other stuff, though, that's you, and only you have that to share. And in case you're worried about David's open-ended request, oh God, please do not forsake me, some of you have that insecurity. Here's a promise to counter that insecurity. Even to your old age and gray hairs, God says, I am he who will sustain you. I have made you, and I will carry you. If you're here, you have purpose. One more, Psalm 92, the righteous flourish like the palm tree. They still bear fruit in old age. They are ever full of sap and green. Here's something I want you to hear today that I think is hard to share and hard to hear. You can't get back that previous season. You're not going to have what you used to have. But God has a new season for you. And if you'll stop looking back, you'll see it. And if God is telling us the truth here, there is just as much, if not more, fruit now than you've ever experienced in your past. So I want to end with a couple questions related to the part of the story we read today. 2 questions. First is, what is Saul's armor for you? Is there anything that's keeping you from being able to step out? That you think, if I just had that, then I could be used by God. And I would say, based on the story, typically it's something you see in someone else that you're just focused on, and you're like, man, if I just could do that better. What is Saul's armor? Is it formal training? Is it a more extroverted personality, and you see people talking and you're like, yeah, I can't do that. Maybe it's a more dramatic testimony and you think that yours is boring. Maybe it's the ability to teach, or whatever it is. Perhaps you have a past that's messy and you're like, if I just had a less messy past, I don't know. Or maybe you have literally heard the message from people, you are too young, you are not ready. That's not God speaking. Or you're too old, you're irrelevant. People don't care that you're here anymore. They won't notice if you left. You're no longer needed. Those are all lies from the enemy to keep you on the sidelines. The point of this story, to be really clear, is not that armor is bad. I think that's worth noting. Armor's good. We were just told to put on the armor in Ephesians 6 that we went through as a church. Armor's good. Formal training, good. What's not good is seeing someone else's armor, someone else's equipping, and saying, that should be me. And if it's not you, you decide, well, I can't be used. This leads to the second question that actually is where I think it gets fun. What is your shepherd's staff and 5 stones? Once you realize, boy, I just don't know that fits me. I don't know that I'm the academic type who's going to go get the college degree, or whatever it is. I just keep using that one. But once you come to grips with, that's not me, well, then who are you? I think of teachers who are patient and kind with students. Last night I was going to sleep and I thought of a college professor that I had who had the greatest impact on my life, more than any pastor I've ever had. And I thought, I wonder if he's still alive. And I thought, I need to call him. MSU Bozeman. He was the choir guy there. Huge impact on my life. Nurses and doctors who administer not only healing, but bring comfort and calm in people's hardest moments. Contractors who bring a vision into reality in a way that I can never do. Business owners who know how to turn a little into a lot. That's a gift that I also am not great at. Parents who take their kids seriously, not as an annoyance or something on the way to a better life, but the most important ministry right now you have. Administrators who bring order from chaos. We wouldn't survive without you. Coaches who teach students that life is more than winning this game. Artists who are continually directing our attention to the beauty of God's world. You get the idea. And by the way, you notice I'm still so reductive in my presentation of this in that I'm naming jobs. It's not a role, it's not a title, it's you. Everywhere you go, whatever your job, who are you? As our worship team comes, I just want to say that as you begin to step out in faith and be bold and say, hey, if no one else will do that, I'll do that. I'll serve in Mac Kids. I'll show up on a Saturday and stack chairs. And that is when you begin to discover things in yourself in terms of how God wired you. And when you discover that confidence, which I will say personally and humbly, I believe, God has instilled so much more confidence in me. And it's not in me, it's not me, it's just I know where I'm supposed to be. I know what God has put in my heart to do. But the moment God says, it's time to move on, I will say, okay. I want that confidence for all of us in the church in whatever role God leads us to play in our lives. But the only way you'll get that is if you just say yes to God. You say, God, I want that. I want to be on this grand adventure with you. I don't want to just have a job that I complain about every night. And I would just say this as a first step. If you want that, right now, close your eyes if you need to. Ask for that. Pray for that. Say, God, I want to know who you made me to be. I want to discover the unique way you've wired me. And maybe, God, there's things you've already revealed to me. Thank you for that. I want to go deeper. I want to be all in for the work that you are calling specifically me to. God, help me not to think of some future idealistic reality where then I can be effective and used, but to start right where I'm at, with the people right in front of me, boldly living into what you've called me to. The other part of this that I want to ask you is, who do you know who could use some encouragement? Is there anyone that came to mind who you would say is stuck by feelings of inadequacy? Maybe they're looking back at a previous season. Maybe they've heard you can't. You don't have what it takes. You're not important. And my challenge for you as a member of this church is to step out in faith and be the presence of Jesus to that person. Call out something that you see in them. You are good at this. Boy, I have noticed this in you. Speak encouragement. And the beauty of when we do this, even though I know we're all wrestling with our own feelings of insecurity and we want to figure out our own story, but when you set that aside for a second and put someone else first, your own confidence will be a byproduct of that decision. You will see God use you to encourage another, and suddenly you will start to know more about yourself and who God's made you to be. Maybe it is one of your children who you just sense doesn't feel like they're important, doesn't feel like God cares that they're here. And you make a plan to change that perception. It's maybe a coworker. It's someone at church that you had an interaction with. You can just see the wind is out of their sails. They don't have a reason to be. Maybe it's a lady you see at the grocery store consistently who's friendly and no one's ever stopped to say, hey, thank you for being so kind. When we step out in faith, when we trust God to use us, we discover our own shepherd staff, our own 5 stones. And the more of that we discover, the more deeply we learn to trust God when He calls us to move. Let's pray. Lord, I simply ask that you would continue the work that you have begun in each one of us. That for those who have yet to experience you, you would begin a new work of grace in their souls today. That you would open their hearts to your extravagant love for them, to your goodness, to your passion for their future. And And that we, all of us, in our own ways, in our own places, could say, yes, God. Yes, we want to walk with you. We want to know ourselves more in the way you see us. And we want to live into the purposes you have for us. We pray all this because of you, Jesus, and in your name.